All right, Dan, welcome to the campfire sessions. It's beautiful to finally get outside and enjoy some nice weather today.
Absolutely. Looking forward to this conversation for sure.
I think this is going to be a good one because you've got a very interesting thing going on yourself as far as living out of an RV and helping out everybody that you can help out and just lifting everybody up. And that's what the whole concept of this thing is all about.
I love it. I love it.
So, speaking of living in an RV, you got to talk to me a little bit about how that all came about.
Yeah, so definitely not something that I've thought about my entire life at by any stretch of the imagination. My mother back in the 80s when she was in her mid 40s decided to quit her job, and she took an old 1967 Plymouth Valiant and kind of converted it into a quasi RV. She took the back seat out of it, put a sheet of plywood in there and a mattress, and traveled all around the country solo. I was living in Pennsylvania with my dad at the time. Her and my dad were divorced, so I was up there with him, so it kind of gave her an opportunity to, you know, be an early empty nester, so to speak. And she traveled all around the country solo, just showing up on friends' doorsteps and families' doorsteps, and working when she felt she was running low on money, and ran that Valiant till it wouldn't run anymore, and ended up trading it in on a for a plane ticket back to Florida, and went back to school. So always loved telling people her story, but never envisioned it to be my story. And then in early 2019, I took two solo trips, one from Pennsylvania to Dallas, Texas, to go down to the ABCA convention, the American Baseball Coaches Association convention. Um, and later on that year, I did the same thing, took a solo trip from Pennsylvania down to Orlando, Florida. And those two trips were probably the first time in my life where I actually took the time to enjoy the journey. I ran a youth nonprofit organization for 30 years and traveled a lot with them, on buses to baseball tournaments and stuff like that, but absolutely never enjoyed the journey. I didn't have time to enjoy the journey. We were always on a very regimented schedule. It was always, all right, we got to have the kids to the, old country buffet by 8 o'clock in the morning. They've got, an hour and 15 minutes to eat, and then they need to head off, get them back on the bus and get to the facility, and then, get ready for, practices, games, whatever the case was. So those two solo trips, I really took my time. I left a few days early to Dallas and stopped in Memphis, spent the day in Memphis, um, went to the Lorraine Motel, spent some time on Beale Street, ate some great barbecue, and just kind of enjoyed that time. On the way back, I took a detour down through Louisiana, saw some friends of mine, and then same thing when I went to Orlando. I stopped in Atlanta on the way down to see one of my old baseball players. Spent a day with him, and on the way back from Florida, well, as well, I got off I-95 for a while and you know drove a couple hundred miles out of my way to get into the mountains and enjoy the scenery. And there was such an incredible serenity that came over me on those two trips, um, that I finally had this aha moment where I understood why my mother did what she did. Um, but again, never envisioned it to be my story. Love telling people her story, but never thought that it would be mine. And at the same time, I was in the process of adding 10 new chapters to my first book. But with my schedule, it was very difficult to write. I mean, over the summertime, for me to work, 90 to 100 hours a week was not uncommon whatsoever. We ran, youth baseball tournaments on weekends. So for me to get to our complex at 5 o'clock in the morning and leave at midnight was not an uncommon practice on a, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Um, so it was very difficult to sit down and write. And after those two trips, I had written like I hadn't written in years, and almost felt as though there was a calling, a voice speaking to me saying it was time to close, this chapter of my life and start a new one. And travel and use my writing and use my voice to help others and influence others. And initially I dug my heels in and I didn't accept it. I figured this was not, again, this was my mom's story. This wasn't my story. And continued to write like I hadn't written in a while, and finally started to kind of embrace this, this idea of starting a new chapter. As difficult as that was, because the organization I ran, I founded. I founded it when I was 20 years old. So, at this point in my life, I was 50 years old. So, 60% of my lifetime had been spent, you know, working, you know, every ounce of blood, sweat, and tears that I had went into this organization. And we were doing great work. We were changing kids' lives. We were keeping them off the streets, by using the game of baseball to do that and, keep them out of trouble and direct them in their right path in life. Um, but yeah, that there was just this constant, you know, voice telling me to make the change. And finally, once I embraced it myself, I ran the idea by my wife, and she'd thought I'd lost my mind. Her response was kind of the same, like, hey, that was your mom's story, and that was cool, that was great, but that's not our story. Um, but a few months went by, and she was going through some issues at her employment as well, and finally frustrated with the direction of where some of the conversations with her employer were going. She came home one day and she said, "You know what? Maybe this is a sign as well. I'm in. Let's do this." So I contacted my board, let them know. We came up with an exit strategy, and the day that the governor of Pennsylvania was issuing shutdown orders for COVID, we were sitting in the office of an RV dealership, not putting the, we're buying the RV. We'd already put the money down, but we were buying the RV and driving it home with a ton of uncertainty in the air at that point, because that was not part of our plan to have a mortgage payment and an RV payment and have an RV sitting in our yard for an indefinite period of time. So, but again, it just felt like the right thing to do. And, we ended up taking our house off the market for a little bit, but when Pennsylvania opened up the real estate market again, we put it right back on, and within 10 days we had an offer and started selling everything. And um, August 14th of 2020, we hit the road and we haven't looked back since.
There's so much in that story that I can relate with and identify to. And there's that special calling that we all, at some point in our life, feel within our heart to drop what we're doing, transition into the uncertainty of things. And, given the timing, because while you were doing that during COVID, I was going through a second divorce and fighting depression and anxiety. Had no idea where I was going to end up, but that's where Project Mindfully Outdoors really got its start, was within the uncertainty of life. Talk to
Yeah.
me some about how that uncertainty really changed the perspective of life for you, how you really tackled it.
I mean, I think we can all relate that 2020 was a weird time for all of us.
Oh,
uh,
absolutely.
so, so but yet with what we were doing, like there was just this incredible sense of peace over everything that we were doing, that we were making the right moves. And call it God, call it the universe, call it, however you are connected spiritually. There was just this incredible sense of peace that, just continued to move forward and follow the plan, even though the plan wasn't the way we drew it up, you know. Like I said, having the RV payment and the house payment was not at all part of our plan. But again, it seemed right. And, there was just such, um, I guess just trusting that sense of peace that we were doing the right thing, even though it seemed, you know, so off the wall at the time, you know. Um, and again, as we look back now, and in life, you can only look back and connect the dots. You can never connect the dots looking forward, So as you look back and connect the dots, you do understand that everything happened in its exact, you know, perfect timing. Um, and now, I've since, I did republish that book I was working on, and then have published three since. Working on my fifth as we speak. Um, and even though we were doing life-changing work before, um, hearing people tell me that they've read one of my books and, it meant a lot to them and it touched them in a special way. I mean, we're in a campground in Galveston, Texas right now as we record this, and, I've done a couple book signings and sold some books here. And, having people come up to me, I had a woman come up to me last night. So, I've been reading your book, and, um, I laughed and I cried, and, every emotion in between. I really appreciate you, you know, doing what you do. Just makes me feel better. We do a lot of volunteer work, and that's incredibly fulfilling as well. Um, so I think if you just, in those times of uncertainty, if you just stay focused, don't think of, like, what's my plan B going to be? I think if we focus on plan B, um, it takes us off of, takes our energy off of plan A, you know. So instead of trying to think about, how are you going to shift if things don't play out, um, the way you want them to, I think you just stay focused on what the end goal is. And again, even if you have to make some pivots along that path, um, don't lose sight of what that end goal is. I think that's the best way that I can describe it, if I actually described it in that kind of long-winded answer there.
I really think that a lot of that at the end there about being flexible is one of the most important parts of life in general.
Yeah,
Whether you've whether you're chasing your calling or you're just still in that valley trying to find your way. Allowing yourself that space to pivot and be flexible about things, I think is one of the most important parts. But you also talked about and keep going back to the word trust. Trust is a very hard thing for any of us to truly wrap our hand around, whether it's trusting somebody else, it's trusting ourselves, or trying to trust something that you can't see.
yeah,
And when it comes to the latter of that, it's all about finding the little almost bird seeds along the way, just enough to continue to nurture that hope. And then finding the willingness within hope to continue to take the steps.
yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, even now today, I mean, there's still a lot of uncertainty in what we do with our lives. Um, Again, working on a fifth book, um, you know, doing a book signing tour. You have an anticipation of how you want to see things work out, but they don't always work out that way. But, I think you just pressing forward and, you know, putting that one step in front of the other and moving forward is really just, the only way you know, that we can get through it. And again, being able to pivot, being able to adjust. And, a lot of times I'll go back to my old baseball coaching days. Baseball was such a great game to be able to teach those life lessons of having to make adjustments. And, you can sit there, you can be expecting a fastball, but if you're throwing a changeup or a curveball or a slider, you have to adjust to be able to, to make contact. You can't just, you know, sit fastball and freeze if you get something different, you know?
I think that actually gets back to one of the most important parts of life, which is judging the situation
Yeah.
and being honest about it.
Yep.
We a lot of the time we like to tell ourselves that story that makes us feel safe and comfortable so we can avoid the tougher situation. And you're right, in being a nomad, writing books, and in my case, doing a podcast and everything that I do, there's all kinds of uncertainty. Whether you're getting out on a trail, you're sitting at a campfire like this, there's always that what if. But if you embrace that what if as just a part of the challenge, it makes making that shift a little bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing, um, to not get so caught up in the what ifs is to really embrace the moment that you're in, you know? So, I mean, this right here, me and my RV and you up there by the campfire, it's just a matter of embracing this moment. I mean, earlier today, my wife and I walked over to the beach and, watched the sunrise and, really just again embracing that moment and how special it is to be able to do that and not always be so hyper focused on what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen next month, or what's going to happen next year. Because at the end of the day, we can't control any of that anyway. So if we put all that energy into what we can't control, we lose what we can, which is literally, the moment right now is the only thing we actually have control over. We don't have control over anything else.
That's a mindset though that's built through practice.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, as
Oh,
we
yeah.
talk back and forth and with somebody listening and thinking about their situation, it's almost like listening to somebody that just makes it look easy. And in reality, even now with putting, a lot of time and practice into it, it still doesn't always come as simple as someone can make it sound.
Right.
And that in itself is a part of the journey.
Yeah.
That's where that's where I feel like, gratitude and affording yourself some grace becomes so important.
Yeah. No doubt about that. And it is a daily practice. I mean, it's not something that comes easy to me. It's something I got to work on every single day. Because again, at the end of the day, we are still all, incredibly flawed human beings, So, um, and I think just having conversations like this are part of that practice to, get it out in the open and talk about it and, you know, share it with other people and then hopefully take our own advice as we're talking about it to be able to, to embrace that.
No, most definitely. Because, somebody right now, it's an actionable, simple step after listening to a conversation like this. Go to your buddy and just talk about where you're at, where you've been, where you want to go. And then you start building it all together. And as you do that, you realize that all the tools that you're looking for in order to get there, everything you're making excuses about, really becomes irrelevant because those tools are actually already inside of you. You've been training for the next footstep you're about to take.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt about that. And it is. It's just something that every single day we've got to put into practice and, continue to work on it. I mean, that's all we can do. That's the best we can do at that point.
It's a lot like I think about where I'm at right now and having to put in a lot more physical time in the gym in order to maintain my health. It doesn't come easy, but I can at least see results. And when we talk about the mental arena and building these practices, it becomes a lot harder to stay on track because the results aren't as visual.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great analogy for sure. I mean, it's easier to stay on track when you can see it every day. But when you don't, it takes a lot more focus and a lot more, practice to keep at it at the end of the day.
It builds a lot of along that practice in the mental arena, it brings with it a lot of frustration, setbacks, things like that are easy to knock you off the path, but that
Mike, I think I lost you.
I don't know how I got booted, but
I
anyway,
was just going, I was just going in to check my internet. I'm like, oh, I've got good signal.
it
Um,
was mine. Mine's been giving me issues all week long. So anyway, I'll edit that out and fix that up. But
that's what I say all the time. I'm like, well, I needed practice editing anyway, so I'll be able to cut that where it needs to be.
exactly. It like we keep talking about, it's all about putting in the work, and life always gives you the opportunity to practice
Yep.
in order to build yourself up. But it's what you do with that opportunity. Are you going to get frustrated? Are you going to run away from the challenge? Or are you going to say, hey, I really, in this case, need to practice editing. So, haha, I'm going to deal with it and I'm going to go forward. I'm going to
There
make
you
the
go.
best of the situation. And I know that going through, because I spend a lot of time on the road myself, when you're out there and you're doing these things, you're living that kind of life, there's a lot of challenge that comes up.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean just the other week we were out in Phoenix and you know, getting ready to make a long drive to Texas to work an event and we stopped and we were making a purchase of some bikes and as we were getting the bike rack put on and you know all the final touches of that purchase, we noticed our one rear tire looked extremely low. Um, and we you know we went to a Circle K, uh, tried to put some air in it. Um, Still, you know, was low. It was actually too low to actually, you know, for the compressor to even get air in it for the most part, that type of compressor. Um, so we're kind of limping up the road, and I have my wife Googling, you know, tire repair shops, and it's, you know, going on 6 o'clock at night. So at this point, I'm really just trying to have her find one that's close that we can pull into the parking lot and sit there till the next morning because I'm not expecting, you know, anything to be open. And literally, as she's trying to Google, you know, tire repair shops near me, we're driving by a tire repair shop, less than a mile down the road from this bike shop. And lo and behold, the garage doors are open. So we make a quick turn into their lot. There's a guy sitting there, and I get out and I'm like, hey, you know, how long you guys open till? Got a low tire here in the rear. Um, you know, can you get us hooked up? And again, I mean, we're in a vehicle that not every tire repair shop can can help us out with. But they did have a heavy duty jack. Um, you know, got us jacked up. It happened to be the inside rear dually that was the issue. And there was a pretty much an arrowhead shaped stone in our tire. Who knows where we picked it up at, but they got us squared away and back on the road in probably just over an hour. And it really didn't, you know, mess us up a whole lot at all. You know, originally I'm thinking, you know, this is a Tuesday and we're supposed to be in Texas on a Thursday. We generally don't push that hard to get from point A to point B, but this was just kind of a unique situation where I had some book signings and events we were working that, you know, kind of cramped our schedule a little bit. Um, you know, so I'm right away, I'm just kind of thinking of all the other, you know, things that we're going to have to do to, you know, make it to where we have to make it. And as it turns out, like I said, it delayed us an hour for the most part, and we were back on the road and you know, made it to where we needed to get to in plenty of time. But yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, it can throw you a lot of curves, and you just have to be able to, you know, kind of think on your feet and figure things out and you know, make the best of whatever situation comes up for sure.
It brings to mind the part in Meditations where Marcus Aurelius is talking about all these different unfortunate things that happen that become impediments along the journey of life. And then he stops and he reframes himself and thinks of it from a different perspective about how all these different things that happen, all these impediments that come our way, they're not only prescribed for us in the moment, but it's fortunate that they're happening to us because it gives us an opportunity to, as we talk about, practice all these different principles and values that we want to hold and actually utilize to be part of our life. But even more important than that, he talks about how as you make the impediments the way, the answers to the problems almost are laid within the question itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And just the other, going back to what I said a little earlier about, looking back, you can always connect the dots. Just as a side note to that story I just told about the tire, a couple things happened earlier in that day that put us in the position we were in. So I was originally supposed to do a book signing from 2 o'clock to 7 o'clock, and I actually ended up changing the time of that signing to earlier in the day. Um, I think it was 9 to 2 or something like that, so that we could get down to the bike shop. The bike shop was actually owned by one of my former players and his wife's family. Um, so we wanted to make the purchase from them as well. So I adjusted my schedule to get down to the bike shop before they had closed. Um, and just kind of those two factors there, that if I was still signing later in the evening, we definitely don't find a tire shop that's open. We don't end up going into Mesa where, we're less than a mile from a tire shop once we discover that we've got an issue with the tire. Um, so again, when you look back and you think, man, that everything did kind of line up the way it was supposed to um, not really sidetracked us. And I think when stuff happens like that and you can reflect and understand how much worse it could have been, um, if all those dots didn't line up, I think that gives you, you know, a perspective of gratitude as well, even in unfortunate situations.
I think it really does. As I'm listening, I'm thinking to a month ago where I was down and out with the flu. I finally caved in and went to go get looked at and found out that I was in the midst of what's called diabetic ketone acid, of an episode of that where it can potentially be life threatening. In my case, it was pretty severe and pretty up there. But, had I not given in and gone to get looked at, things could have been a lot worse. Laying there in intensive care for a couple of days really put things into perspective. It really strengthened that resolve that comes with building gratitude.
Yeah,
And, again, another perfect visual of how the answers are actually within themselves. And sometimes the things that we go through that we look at as unfortunate are actually a blessing in disguise.
yeah, they absolutely are, without a doubt.
So I want to kind of transition as the fire starts to wind down a little bit. And I want you to talk to somebody that, might be in one of these situations where we're trying to transition our perspective. Arm them with a couple of tools to get them on a more, I guess, more level path.
Um, I mean, there's nothing that I haven't already talked about. So just to kind of, you know, put it in a Cliff Notes version is, to really show gratitude for the moment, be willing to pivot and always, focus on that end goal, not so much as, what a plan B might be, what a plan C might be, because that just takes energy away from plan A. And I think, um, I really truly believe that you don't even want to come up with a plan B unless, plan A completely 100% blows up in your face. But I think anytime you have multiple options that you're giving yourself, it's just too easy to opt out and to not focus on what you really want to do. So, that's really it for me is just, again, gratitude in the moment, being able to make adjustments and staying focused.
Yeah, it's a lot of reflecting, looking back, being grateful for where you've been because it's brought you to the opportunity that you're looking at, and just staying grounded, staying present
Yeah.
within it. You know,
Yeah.
don't allow yourself to disconnect just because the challenges have arisen.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I'm going to give you some time to do all the shameless plugging here at the end. All your books, how people can get in touch with you, work with you, what you got coming up, all that good stuff.
Absolutely appreciate that. The best spot to find me is just on my website because all my social media links are there, links to my podcast, links to my books, links to my book signing tour. Everything is there on my website. So that's journeymymotherson.com, which I know can be quite a bit for the keyboard. So if that's too much to type, you can also type in danclouser.com, and that's Dan, CLOUSER.com, or journeymymotherson.com. Once you get to the website, literally everything is there that you need to know about me, whether you want to book me for a speaking engagement, have me come do a talk about one of my books, do a book signing, um, or just reach out and see if we're coming through your neck of the woods and you want to hang out for a little while. I'm cool with that as well. So everything to reach me is right there on the website.
Awesome. Well, Dan, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thanks for taking some time out and sitting down with me here at the campfire today.
I love it. And again, I love this concept of sitting around the campfire. Absolutely love it. So thanks, Mike.
Absolutely. I'd like to do it again sometime.
Yeah, maybe we'll do it in person next time.
That'd be awesome.